Hi, Jerry. I'm live.
Hi, David.
I'm live, just to let you know. I'm
Oh,
testing.
okay. Okay. And that's
Yeah.
fine. Should I mute or what?
Oh, just to know that you're on the YouTube live.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. I don't,
Make sure that wasn't going to blare everybody out. So, welcome to unthinkman.com. And this is David Boje. I'm here with Jerry McCullough and Sabine Trufino.
So nature is all of that
Okay.
relations, polar relations. And number seven, this beyond is beyond Newtonian space.
Okay. I don't know why it's doing that.
I'm not sure.
I'm going to close out my other YouTube, see if that helps. Okay, so far we seem to be okay. And okay, so we are live streaming and I got the problems with the acoustic settled.
Here in Vandaluria. I want to go through some wave walk with Martin Heidegger's work.
I don't know why it's doing that.
Well, because it don't work.
Oh, whoops.
Here's the point. Is there some way we can braid together I walk with way walk? And not
I was going to say, so that's interesting.
Zero-sum game or a win-lose game.
Oh, now it's okay. Hi, Betty.
Hello, David.
Hi.
Hi,
So-
Betty.
Yeah. David, David, your face in that background lit up on my screen as soon as I opened my computer, and you were looking for something. I thought, well, what's happening here?
Maori is a word for non-Maori people who came as settlers to New Zealand.
Why? I'm gonna make some sound here to see if I can.
And then the Maori. So can we co-design the streams to interplay? Right? I'll let you come back to this chart on your own. You can get to it, but it's basically focused on
All right, we'll try it again. Hi, Grace Ann.
Hi, everybody.
I muted everybody because I wanted to be sure we could get the sound perfect. So, welcome to unthinkman.com, and we are doing a live stream on Sabine Trofimo's prepared some things. I've prepared some things, and we'll have a general discussion. So, I did a couple of videos that are out this week. One is looking at Leroy Little Bears and Vine Deloria's work on indigenous metaphysics. And I did a video comparing them to Heidegger's metaphysics. And I weaved in Grace Ann Rosille's book on tribal wisdom and the difference between indigenous ways of knowing and Western ways of knowing. And I came out with 17 conclusions, which are in the video. But basically, Heidegger returns to the Greek before Socrates and tries to establish his approaches to being in the world. And it kind of left me a little flat because if you compare it to Vine Deloria and Leroy Little Bear, by the way, Little Bear did a keynote here at the Quantum Storytelling Conference happening in December. And if you go through his books and his many YouTubes on quantum physics and its relationship to indigenous ways of knowing, there's a significant overlap with a couple of exceptions. that I produced in the video. But one of them is that for both Vine Deloria and Leroy Littlebear, waves are spirits, and energy is spirit, and everything is animated. And so there's a strong focus on animism, which is the aliveness of all things. But the relatedness of things is very much parallel to quantumness. Then today's video I did, it's kind of a rough cut today that I sent out, and I don't expect anybody looked at it. It was 14 minutes, and it was getting ready for Sabina's presentation on Heidegger's essay on the what is truth. And again, I looked at it from an indigenous and from a Western point of view, and I tied it to the whole thing on the January 6th and what's the essence of truth about January 6th from a Heidegger point of view. So I don't know if Sabine, if you're ready to talk to us about your take on this or what you want to do, but anyway, there's Cristiano. So we are live, Cristiano. So just so you know.
Hello, bro.
Hello.
Hello, people.
I hope your dissertation is going really, really well.
Yes. And I'd like very much about your presentation and slides about the methodology of the tell this true and the anti-narrative. It's
Yeah,
very interesting, and I think that I will create or elaborate some table of demonstrating some characteristics of both, and in which each of them about the double way walk and I walk.
Oh, thank you, Cristiano. I look forward to that. I'm going to keep people muted until they get ready to talk. So there's Sabine. So Sabine, are you ready to talk about the essence of truth? Or are you still logging in? Did you want to have a go at it? Or did you want me to talk about it? Can you hear us? Can you?
Hi, David. Yeah, you know what? You go ahead, and I am not at a point where I would like to be. I only got about like halfway through.
Well, halfway is pretty good.
You know, maybe not even that. So, you know, so you can go ahead, and I can fill in if you would like me to.
Yeah, hold on. Okay,
Hi,
that would be,
Christian.
so let me try to do
Hi,
that.
Paul, Betty, Jerry.
Okay, so, all right. I will try to share a screen and show some slides then, if that's okay. And I'll try to get it done in about 10, 15 minutes, if that's good.
Is this being recorded? Not a big deal.
It is being recorded, yes.
Okay.
Okay. So now the rules are that if you have your video on, you are on live stream in the YouTube community. If you have your video off, you're anonymous. If your microphone goes on, your screen still goes on. So let's get started. All right. Hopefully we can see this. All right. Okay, let's start with this. And I wonder if it'll play. Okay, here we go. All right, so what's true about January 6th? And We're looking at their being, the definition of Dasein from the German, and their being there in several different forms of what's true. This is Thinkment.com, and some of the questions, does the essence question deprive all thinking of breath? So that's a Heidegger question from this essay. Does it bring to light the groundlessness of all philosophy? That's a big ask. I'm not sure it does that. Does essence of truth question disregard for actual existence? Strong common sense asserts its own right to an appeal to obviousness. So January 6th has some obviousness, right? But the question is this a capital assault? Is it a revolution? Is it a rebellion? Is it defending the then president or soon to be ex-president? So we'll continue our discussion of Western ways of knowing and indigenous ways of knowing. And again, recommend the video on Leroy Little Bear and Divine Deloria. They have many videos, but they have some that are about indigenous metaphysics. And this is today is a lot about Heidegger's approach to metaphysics. Just to go back to that, I think that Waywalk, as I talk about in the other video, is about history and it privileges time. And I'm talking here about Heidegger's ways of knowing. And indigenous ways of knowing privileges nature and the renewal of nature. And so we have a split here when we look at this. For example, all the waving flags, one with the cross, one stop the steal, a lot of American flags, Texas, etc. A lot of people there. Some call it insurrection. Now, in the essay, there's a section on 2 5-mark silver coins. So I took out a photo image of it. Heidegger talks about these 2 coins. And are they authentic silver? Are they fool's silver? I think his mark coins might have been gold, but I wanted to do a comparison that's coming up. So we say those are actual coins. Here are insurrectionists, and you can see how they're costumed very theatrically inside the Capitol. 2 Trump silver coins have come on the market, I think last week. And they say honor, courage, integrity, perseverance, Donald J. Trump, 45th president, etc. Are those authentic coins? Are they genuine? These are questions that Heidegger raises in the essay. So some look at this as rebellion, about stop the steal. And here you can see demonstrators, some in like, I don't know, motorcycle caps or something, storming the Capitol. On the Essence of Truth starts out on just about page 1, saying it's not a truth of practical experience, it's not a truth of economic calculation, not a truth of technical consideration, not a truth of political sagacity, not truth of thoughtful reflection, not truth of cultic belief. Well, number 6, I think we can genuinely ask about that. The first 5, that's quite a move there, Western metaphysics, to cut all those off. So MAGA could be considered cultic. Make America Great Again with the caps and the shirts and all the rest of it. Where do we stand today at Thinkment Circle on the essence of truth and the kind of thinking? Like Leroy Little Bear says that his easy definition of metaphysics is it's the kind of thinking that we've been socialized into, and that Western education, Western science is quite a bit left brain and the indigenous because of their process ways of their language, and their thinking is more grounded in the right brain. And we know that left brain and right brain go back and forth, and it's not an easy split there. Is truth correspondence, and here's a German word, Angelichung, in accord with matter or knowledge? So he's raising the question, and he also says, is it a matter of knowledge? So he works with these multiple meanings in the essay, and this is one of them. I focus on this comment because when we're comparing it to quantum physics and matter or indigenous nature, it's a little different than knowledge ideas or knowledge concepts. So the divine right to lead by leaders is bestowed by God. This was brought out by both Vine Deloria and Leroy Littlebear. But here in Heidegger, he says, intellectuis divinis, intellectuis humanis, divine plan of creation guarantees veritas. In other words, God's plan, biblical, guarantees truth. Accord, agreement of word order of creation taking as proposition of logic or logos. So here Heidegger kind of descends a lot into logos, and he's saying that the logos of truth coming through theology is suspect. So we look at this and say, is this divine correspondence and correctness a way to get at the essence of truth? Is there an adequation of things in intellect? And he's sort of arguing both sides of it, but coming down in that we can't get to the essence of truth through that route of religion. Freedom is the F word. I like this photo. If you see the left-hand figure there, it says, freedom is my second favorite F word. And then it has he's got a skull cap and a mask on, Skeletor or something. I look at the Supreme Court as their presidential comportment of leadership, conforming to pre-given fulfillment of essence of truth. So this, Heidegger doesn't talk about the Supreme Court. This is what I'm throwing in, using some of his quotes from Heidegger. Essence of freedom, I say of presidential leadership, and Heidegger calls that an openness of comportment, and it's being assessed by a district court now, given the Supreme Court decision. And Heidegger asks, is this human caprice? Is it sound or unsound judgment? Which is interesting, I think, to look at. And then Heidegger in section 3, the essay is written in a number of sections. I'm trying to identify where I pulled out some ideas. Deceit, dissimulation, lies, deception, illusion, semblance of all kinds of untruth. And now we look at the Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity, and that's come down. There's a lot of dispute on this, a lot of attempts to reform the Supreme Court based on a number of things, but certainly this ruling has been known as the Kingmaker ruling. Now, 187 minutes took place in Donald Trump's quote unquote dangerous refusal to stop the Capitol quote unquote rioters. The essence of freedom Heidegger talks about, and I ask a question of us as in Thinkman's Circle, are we prepared for the kind of transformational thinking here? Correctness between truth and freedom and experience of the concealed truth, essential ground of Dasein. And in this essay, he equates Dasein with man. And I think it should be human or woman. And then there's a critique we talked about last week, I didn't think meant whether it should be human at all and should include all species. Again, that's more of indigenous ways of knowing. But in any event, inner possibility of correctness of a more original, essential truth. And the question is, does Heidegger succeed at that in the essay? And we'll talk about that at the end. Freedom opened up into an open region, 187 minutes, Trump letting the insurrection be, and this is a Heidegger existent, in other words, existent as it was planned. and there's a question of who planned it and how many groups planned it. Then we have let it be, and the German word unconceals is unconcealment, and sign being, there being, da meaning there. So Representative Adam Kinzinger says President Trump did not fail to act during the 187 minutes between leaving the ellipse and telling the mob to go home. He chose not to act. In other words, he's making a point about the choice not to act as a decision. Again, we've been looking at I walk and way walk. I walk more about time and history. Way walk more about nature, more about place as opposed to time, more about space of a place and one's space in a place and the care of the land. And we really don't find that much or hardly any of that in Heidegger's treatment. Tells It True is a new website I created and part of a new book I'm doing. And we're looking at January 6th as having two kinds of paths to truth. And half of the United States is on one path and half is on the other. Way, walk, and truth of the Bible. Here you see a Trump supporter, again with the Skeletor hands and mask, grasping a Bible and a flag, Trump, keep America great again. Or make America, or no, it says keep America great. Again, this would be critiqued in the Heidegger essay as kind of a theological justification of truth. Truth is, and Heidegger goes through Kant and how Kant made time, space, and truth out there in the heavenly realm and not in the earth realm. So existent disclosure, letting beings be attuned. And I pulled this out because a lot of my own work is on attunement, which comes out of being in time. Every mode of open comportment flourishes in letting beings be, and in each case a comportment to this or that being. A question I'm raising here is, what is the presidential comportment? And has freedom has already attuned all comportment to being as a whole? In other words, is there comportment just to a particular reputation or getting an election or defeating the other party, or is there a sense of being as a whole? And being as a whole from an indigenous point of view would be nature and cosmos, etc. So I would say it's kind of restricted. If you look at, quote, section 5, freedom has already attuned to comportment to being as a whole, attuned, existent, in other words, existent, exposedness to beings as a whole can be experienced and felt only because the man who experienced, or let's say the woman experienced, or the president experienced, or the followers experienced, without being aware of the essence of the attunement, is always engaged in being attuned in a way that discloses being as a whole. So that's a kind of a proposition about attunement. If we look at the division in the United States between Democrats and Republicans, and we look at this sample, all insurrection, 85% Democrats say that. Trying to overthrow government, 85% Democrats. It's patriotism, 40% of the Republican representatives. Defending freedom, 56%. So you see a very strong split here. This is Pinocchio Loves Trump. And it's about errancy. There's a section 7 that's about errancy, being errant. And is making false claims is an example of errant. And here we just see a few months and the number of false claims spiking in particular days. There was some 30,000 during the presidency that have been documented. Okay, about anti-narrative. I've redone my anti-narrative since you've seen it last, and the 7 processes, and developed an indigenous way of looking at those processes and a Western way of knowing. and I decided to stop using the old 7 anti-narratives that I showed last week. How many have ears for these words matters not. Who those are that can hear them determines man's or human standpoint in history. Again, notice the focus on history and not on nature, and not just here, but throughout the essay. Here's just a little overview of what I've done with the anti-narrative from Western Ways of Knowing, and I'm staying with this notion of the schemata of monotheism and dropping beneath that. The bets, facts of future fulfill God's plans. So it's a very theological chart, but it comes from Deloria and Little Bear, my interpretation. So becoming then is split into evolution and entropy, and beyond is a split not of this world, but of heaven awaits the faithful. Between is the split of eternal salvation and materialism consumptions in the earth. And given the prior splits, that becomes possible. Time is split between Chronos and Kairos, and that's coming out of Vine Deloria's book on the metaphysics of modern existence, and his critique of Westerners, that they both are kairotic and kairos, but they do it in a dualized fashion, is his point. And then my continue the before retrospective, linear chronology. IWalk you will find much more palatable, I think, for this audience. Beneath is going, again, beneath the facts, beliefs, opinion, and abstract conceptual to more polytheism, pantheism, nature focus, which is outside of the Western European American religious framework. That's in the future are answerability to nature, becoming is scope of sustaining nature processes, because as Bruno Latour puts it, we have this sort of what I call an eggshell around the earth of livable land, air, water, and we need to care for it. So you see a lot of focus in indigenous on renewal. And beyond Newtonian space, clock, time, matter, energy, structures, universe, clockwork, to spiritual and cosmos wholeness. Then between all our relations, plant, animal, cells, so all our relations, water, air, cosmos, and then place over time, again, that land renewal value system that, and you see a lot of the values in Grace Ann's book on tribal wisdom. Before is nature processes the where over the when. So the where of the place, the land, the space, caring for that over when something occurred. So that's a brief introduction. Now, Grace Ann and I went to, I actually went 2 years in a row, and Grace Ann came the second year to New Zealand. We worked with the Maori leaders there, tribal leaders and elders, and a couple of professors of the Maori. And they have the notion of a braided river. The Maori, right, were invaded, colonized by what they call the Pakeha. These are settler colonialists, but they have to live with them, and they've been there decades upon decades. So the Maori have this notion of the braided river, of a couple of streams, channels in the river blending together, and that's how they approach Iwak and Way in that country. You see in the upper the picture of rivers. And so this holds out opportunity, but I need to emphasize that both Leroy Little Bear and Vine Deloria say it's not going to happen because there's been such an erosion of the culture and such a deterioration and a lack of numbers of people that are aware of the language and practicing it, that they can't possibly balance Western ways of knowing. Anyway, so the other video is why can't we have conversation anymore? And if we have this kind of split and what's true, and tells it true, then these conversations are currently very difficult. And if they continue to be that difficult, democracy probably won't have much chance. And there's more information at Thinkment Circle, auntienarrative.com tells it true. And thank you very much. And now I'll open the floor. So Sabine, maybe you'd like to, I know you and I have read this essay before.
Thank you. Oops.
Okay.
Hold on. My God, my computer's doing such weird things.
Well, your audio is fine.
Well, I can't. Hold on. Okay, here you are. Okay. I would like to make some comments here, and one of them is about the essence of truth being freedom. And I think what we have seen is truth and unfreedom, you know, really don't go together. You know, when there is a lack of freedom, there's often untruth that needs to happen to cover up states of unfreedom and oppression. Then, you know, then it has to come in that there's concealment. You can have not, you know, freedom and so I guess my point is that freedom and concealment are just incompatible with each other. And the second point is that freedom, Heidegger says, is more than a choosing. The essence of freedom is about opening up, but opening up to beings as a whole. And here is where I see some overlap with IWalk, that, you know, we all have the potential to do that. You know, it's just that he is actually criticizing in his essay that we don't do that. Because in real life, we tend to focus on just one being and this letting be. We're letting this one being be, and not always that. He says, since we have the freedom of open comportment, we also have the freedom to not let somebody just be, right? And I think that is a tendency we see today. Why can't we just let somebody be? No, we have to try to convince, persuade, strong arm, and all of that, right? We're not letting beings be, but Heidegger says we have also the freedom to not let a being be. The second point is that he's saying that in real life, right? When we focus on a specific being, that brings being as a whole into concealment. So it seems to be like a contradiction when we focus on one thing or on one being, that we conceal the rest. And that's, you know, something we can discuss. And here I'm quoting, letting be reveals a specific being, but conceals beings as a whole. And how can we do both at once? I mean, is that really a necessity? I don't know that it is, right? Because I think we can focus on one being, but also take into consideration beings as a whole. I don't necessarily see that these have to be mutually exclusive. So I'm throwing in a little bit of a critique here of Heidegger, and he is criticizing the materialism very heavily, actually. And he says that man clings, and again, this is a quote, man clings to what is readily available and controllable. Focus on readily available wants and needs. The mystery of beings as a whole is forgotten, right? So I think here we do have the contrast between Western ways of knowing and indigenous ways of knowing, right? This whole idea of concealing beings as a whole. Okay. And I think that matches what you said beautifully. David.
Thank you. Well, what does everybody else think about bringing in I walk and way walk into the discussion of what is the essence of being true?
David, I was not knowledgeable enough about the link between Western ways of knowing and the role of theology. This, you brought it up very briefly. And anytime in a discussion about truth, we bring up religion, we can't possibly know the truth. So I tried to reconcile the two, and I thought, oops, one of these two things isn't in its right place. We either can talk about our beliefs, our gods, our religion, or we can talk about essence of truth. But essence and religion, I didn't know what to do with that.
Well, I'm coming off the lot of study of Deloria and Leroy Littlebear, who again was our keynote at the Quantum Storytelling Conference. And packed room in New Mexico State University, and was a sellout crowd. And he explained the indigenous ways of quantum physics, and the Vine Deloria really goes after this notion of Western ways of knowing is so tied to theology that they've moved away from an understanding of nature and distant to this kind of abstract notion of truth. Heidegger puts that in the terms of Immanuel Kant, splitting out, these universal truths away from nature and the world. Heidegger is disagreeing with Kant, but he's nowhere near becoming indigenous, nor are any of us, by the way, unless you are indigenous, and I apologize. But, Leroy Littlebear makes the point that we can't be indigenous, and the tribes that are remaining are having trouble holding on to indigenous ways of knowing and beliefs and practices and language, So less than 1% of the population, how can that balance out 99% of the culture of America, for example?
I liked what you said, David, about, the priority of, a place. Because that, I think we don't seem to have that a lot at all.
Absolutely.
And I think place, I think a place, right, that you feel connected to, right? Because I think in our culture, how readily do we move and sell a house? And, it just doesn't seem to have the same meaning. One piece of land is the same as another piece of land, and its history and meaningfulness. It's just, it's all approached in a very utilitarian way. It's a dwelling, it's a dwelling place, but we consider it more or less temporary. And, and does that extend to, is this just a way of thinking that extends, it's like, oh, the place doesn't mean much. Does that extend then to nature and everything, where it's like, well, we just don't really care because we have no attachment, no roots, that means something, it's like when you I guess it's hard for me to find the right words here, but I was actually really stunned, how readily, coming from another country, how readily, people move around here, and it means nothing, it's like, I thought once you set down roots, you're gonna be there, and your children are gonna be there, and your children's children are gonna be there, and and here that just it doesn't, whatever, it just doesn't seem to have that same meaningfulness, and does that, I guess my question is, if we don't feel that way even about our own place where we, grew up and we sell the house, and you know, how can we even extend that, you know, meaningfully to a larger environment like nature or, you know, a forest or, you know, how can we really feel connected to that if we don't feel connected to the place where we were born, grew up, that sort of thing, you know? How does it?
We were in New Zealand. Grace Ann can comment on this if she wants to. We were asked to introduce ourselves from the river and from the mountain that we lived by, the land. And everybody in the Maori, they introduced themselves. We're from this mountain and this river, and we do this fishing, you know. And now I say, well, I'm from live near the Rio Grande, Lake Caballo, and I just walked to Lake Caballo with the two puppies today. And I'm trying to be more conscious of that kind of meditative walking in the land. And I think the point that Leroy Littlebear and Divine Deloria Jr. are making is that the materialistic culture of the United States has subverted the kind of earlier religious experience. And like Heidegger, Divine Deloria goes back to Pythagoras and goes back pre-Socratic and tries to understand the Greek, but then says, you know, nah, we're not getting close enough to land, to nature, that sort of thing. And I'm reminded of Harari's work on the book Nexus, that we've moved so far away in an information society from nature and that sort of technology that we really are cut off or have cut ourselves off. So that, like you're saying, the house is a material good, a material item, but the dwelling doesn't matter where it is. It looks prettier one place than another, but not the same as, not the same connection. I don't know how to have that connection. I'm not sure any of us here can have that connection. That's that indigenous connection. That if Divine Deloria is saying we don't have it in the indigenous communities that strongly as a century or 2 centuries or 1,000 years ago, then what chance do we have, you know?
That brings up another question that I was thinking about. Thank you for explaining how we might get closer to truth. I see where religion it can be a barrier. But screens, we're on screens all the time these days. And so, of course, we're not in nature. We're not experiencing life. But here's my question to Cristiano. I suspect that urbanization and that the way cities are defined has something to do with our ability to reconnect with our environment. Is there an effort to even do that?
Yes, yes. I was considering that, and I was thinking that I can bring to my methodology that thinking about the way walk and the I walk bring the differences and how they can make a dialogue or make expansions in make some to collect data from the empirical field. So I think that the two thoughts they can elucidate a more ampliated reality. So I think that the indigenous metaphysics really and for sure is not the solution to white philosophy and metaphysical way of thinking of life, but it better handles with the Churchill's criticism and so on. So I think that they complement each other.
Okay.
We can make some articles and next research thinking about that. To make people, because I think that the indigenous way of thinking about reality is to bring more people, and even a nation with the multiplicity of people that acting in manage a city or cities. It's the reality of what they think, the way that they think. So I think that is, we can make some research with the two thoughts.
Yeah, it's worth it. I guess I'm resisting the idea that we can only get it through a river and a forest, because so many of us aren't in a position to do that. Take Paul, for example. When you do a dinner with your friends in a local restaurant or cafe, I think that environment is inspiring to you. It's something that reconnects you, but I don't know enough. It may be that that's just better than going out to the desert. I don't know, but
Well,
there's definitely a problem.
what we have very much, this is all very resonant, Betty, what you were saying about place, everybody here. On Saturday was a celebration of my wife's 80th birthday. We gathered at a facility far from where we live, pretty much in South St. Louis City. And that place that we were gathered with lots of friends, about 50 to 60 people, was a place that we have been to on previous occasions. My 60th birthday was celebrated there as a sort of a surprise party. That was an introduction to this wonderful facility. My wife's 70th birthday was celebrated there. And her 80th birthday was celebrated there. And this place that we went to, I wish I had pictures ready to hand. Once upon a time, 40 to 50 to 60 years ago, had been a dairy operation for the city of St. Louis back at that antique time when milk was not to be found in a grocery store, and when grocery stores also were very primitive. This restaurant was bought, this dairy facility, a building, was bought by Bosnian immigrants who came here prior to the war, prior to the, very difficult war back during Bill Clinton's administration. They recreated this dairy to be a very reminiscent place of their home back in Bosnia. It is absolutely beautiful. It has brickwork and stone masonry and pictures of the bridge over the Mostar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In a word, to answer your question about going out to eat. Going out to eat is something that is very much a way that my wife, myself, and our friends, I'm not sure about all of you, but it is something we do as a way of, I want to use the word advisedly, communing. We like to sit at a table and eat and talk. We like doing that. We like also people getting up and moving around inside this place where it isn't a formality where we all sit at a table and we have assigned seats and so on. And we've lived through that life where we went to a formal affair and there were names on the table. We had none of that. We had tables that were set up, just the ordinary tables that they use. And whoever was a guest, whoever came in, they simply went and seated themselves wherever they were. And this brings me to IWOC and WWOC. I wish I had the two graphs here handy, the little schematics that David showed, because I have to do a lot of remembering and thinking and focusing on those 7 elements in order to keep my mind straight about all of this. It just occurred to me, and I'll be quiet here and ask a question. Is in either of those two 7-pointed schematics of the IWOC versus the WWOC. I was wondering, and I don't know, is there anything there about place, about where, about this very thing we are talking about, as where things happen being more important to indigenous people, and when something happens is the crucial matter for somebody who is a Western European thinker, which is very much my training and background.
Yeah,
So I'm always ignorant. And could somebody go into this, because that business about place mattering, quote, more than
sure.
when?
Yeah, good comment, good question. So, Paul, you raised some good issues. Let me deal with the last question. So, Vine Deloria and Leroy Little Bears, Greg Cajete, Don Pepillon, people that Eduardo Barrera, etc. Place is absolutely important. Absolutely important. The land, but and also as you were bringing up the meetings of the people, the community. So the community, and as Gregory Cajete did in his keynote last year, and I think the year before as well, that the Western ways of knowing produces a very individualized culture. And the fact that you can find going out for your birthday and other occasions with friends, that's amazing. That's wonderful. That kind of fellowship. But the place itself, returning to the same restaurant you mentioned, that rings a bell for me. But there's a deeper understanding of place for indigenous ways of knowing is spirit. It has spirit, like this rock from Caballo Lake has spirit. So Westerners don't think of rocks as having spirit. But Paul does. You know, and so when I'm walking on the land, I'm thinking I'm walking on these microbes of spirit and these bushes of spirit and water spirit. I'm going like, I'm just surrounded in spirit, and that's the web of relationships, is spirit in place and in cosmos. So it's a very holistic concept of cosmos that materialism can't quite grasp, I don't think. You know what I mean? It's just
What kind of materialism are you talking about there, David?
consumer materialism.
Consumer materialism.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the
So
way,
go
ahead.
my take so far, and I've got a lot of, going on here. I would like to see a thirding in the WWOK and the IWOK. Somehow a thirding. If anybody can do it, you can, right? In that openings that. Secondly, I wanted to say a little bit about the Ashaninka language, and I'm trying to find an old paper of mine that I did on the Ashaninka language, but their verb form begins with their word for where, okay, and then to get to how, why, when, who, they modify that verb, right? It stays as the functional basis for the language. They modify it to get to the other verb forms, right? I do not think that, okay, first of all, there's no such thing as pan-indigenous. We're all indigenous to somewhere, okay? Vine Deloria talks about, and I'm not sure what.
He says pantheism, and so Lidibor says pantheism, theism, or just no-ism, you know.
So is that a Western label, pantheism and animism?
I don't. I'm just quoting Leroy Little Bear.
So
That's
in God is Red, Vine Deloria's God is Red. He talks about the sacred hoops that have been broken for pretty much everyone, right? And in my research, I had to look again at the 17 matriarchal cultures that are left on the planet, right? That's it. 17 of them so far that we've noticed, right? And even they are broken to some degree, right? That's first. So but I would like to see a thirding in that slide that you showed, because I don't. Okay, so I'm thinking right now about Don Pepion, who I became very close to, and I just love the heck out of him. I don't think that he would say that people can't access this understanding of vibrant materiality, living matter, right? I was reading a passage about the holy basil. Do you mind if I read a little something here? Okay, so holy basil is sacred to the Hindu god Vishnu. So here's a different type of indigeneity, if you will, right? Still religious, right, Betty? I mean, your words are hitting me pretty strongly. It is used in morning prayers to ensure personal health, spiritual purity, family well-being. Strings of bead made from the plant's stem are used in meditation to give clarity and protection. And then it goes on to say, holy basil is classified, and I can't say the word, as Rasayana, an herb that nourishes a person's growth to perfect health and promotes long life. Perhaps 3,000 years, holy basil has been considered one of India's most powerful herbs. The daily use of the herb is believed to help maintain the balance of chakras. And basically, I'm trying to find the part where it talks about it is so sacred. This herb is so sacred, and there is so much communication with this herb, right? That the water that they give to the herb when it's growing is sacred. The ground that it's growing in is sacred. The air around it is sacred. The sunlight that hits it is sacred. Every part that surrounds this environment is sacred around that particular plant. So there are many cultures that can get into this way of being thankful to their surround, right? Being thankful to the materiality. But I'd like to see, because the Western ways of knowing believes that something is repeatable, including, a quantum study, that it can be repeated. And we know that it cannot be repeated. There is no repeatability, even in medical science, right, with their studies, because it's done with different people, it's done at a different time with different researchers. There is a difference. It is non-repeatable. It is now within that spiral. But we like to, our language itself, and this gets back to the Ashaninka, and that language form too is in the Baleen people in Africa. But it gets back to how we speak about what we're doing. So I don't believe there is one truth. I think that also has to be multiple, right? And so that's sort of, if anyone can do this, David, you can add a thirding. You can do this. I have seen you do amazing work, but when it comes down to logos and logocentrism, that's a problem with both now Western ways of knowing and indigenous ways of knowing in some ways, right? Having said that, I think that the indigenous ways of knowing can get back into the living materiality, but it's not going to be done in one way of indigenous knowing. There are multiple truths and multiple ways of getting to it. And that's the way it has to be. I mean, that's just the way it is. right? So that's why I was, last week I said, okay, being must become becoming, because it has to return to that homeoresis, that flow, instead of going to homeostasis, which is the Western way of thinking of things, which brings us into stasis. And now we think things are inert when they're not. We think our surround, the wood on my desk is inert. It's not. It's fully communicating. I may not be able to hear it with my ears, but it is still fully communicating. Am I making some sense here? So that's, if anybody can do a thirding, David, you can do it.
Okay, a couple of things. I've got 20 years investment in being and becoming as part of onto-narrative processes. So it's a little hard for me to give up being and only have becoming. So I'm not sure I can conform to that. Secondly, I'm looking for thirding, and I know it from a Charles Saunders Peirce perspective, but in the dictionaries online, thirding is a term from an old English university. It's a term that hasn't been used since the 1840s. Is according to 1731 is a noun, but I don't think you mean thirding in that way.
No,
So,
I don't. I
code-
don't. And so that thirding for me, if I were to add to the WWOK and the IWOC, would be, the vital materialism or the vital materialist way of knowing, right? Because I think at that point, it gives us some critiques and puts us into multiples. When we stay with words, right, then we also have to, and because we have to, right, we're human beings, we have to acknowledge that there are ecologies of words. I don't think that giving up the notion of ontology is necessarily a great idea. I mean, ontology, that separatism, right, has given us a lot. It gives us a lot, right? Scientifically, into quantum physics, it has given us a lot, right? But I think Donna Haraway and Myra J. Hurd, when you mix those two together, and you figure out that, oh my gosh, there is aliveness here that we haven't accounted for, and we may never be able to account for in Western ways of thinking. Grace Ann.
Gracie Ann, help.
So I'm thinking of something that we've quoted many times on Kaylin Two Trees, and it relates to what Betty asked about being in cities and feeling cut off from nature. In my video, when I asked Kaylin, how do we bring nature into the corporate boardroom? Her answer was, we don't. She said, it's already there. We are nature, and we're already there. And so I think part of it is that we have artificially separated these terms, being and becomingness.
Mhm.
And really, they can encompass each other if
Mhm.
we take a broader and a deeper view of, of avoiding the artificial separateness. And the key, I think, is what Jerry was talking about, is to avoid, when we were watching the videos with Leroy Little Bear and Greg Kate, that Western science is so fixated on fixating things.
Yeah.
And that truth is one immutable thing, whereas the whole indigenous way is that everything is changeable. So yes, we're focusing on the material, but materiality is alive and changing. It's
That's right.
not this thing. So,
And so that's a metamorphic materiality, right? And now the ancient Greeks called it metis, right? Because when she was being chased, she kept transforming into a bird, into a fish, into a tree, into, right? She kept transforming. And so it was this principle of generative and regenerative becoming in actually scientific Gaia theories. Now, that has a terrible ring to the Western mind, right? Gaia, where are you going with this? Is this 1960s acid bullshit? Or, where are you going with it? First Earth Day. Yeah. I mean, I was there at the first Earth Day. So, but there are actually scientific Gaia theories, right? The thing, and I like what you're saying about this connecting, right? Because in word ecologies, connections become pretty huge, right? And then we have the ability to select out those words when we're doing research, when we're doing a paper, that can convey multiples.
So I think, yeah, I think it's a little bit of this particle wave thing.
Mhm.
And I think we need to continue the Western way of knowing, and we can continue studying things that way with an awareness that there's another side.
Right,
And I
exactly.
stop and
But
bring in,
it's more than two sides. There's more than just two sides, Grace Ann. Because if there's just two sides, then we're back into the Aristotelian method, which really is the overlay of Western thinking.
well, I think we get out of two sides when we think of it as paradox. There are
Maybe,
multiple,
but can't there be a thirding? Do you know what I'm saying? That is vibrant, that's alive, that's, I think there can be.
yeah, I agree, but I think that by specifying third, now you have two pairs. You can fall
Well,
into the trap. It's
be,
just to be aware that we don't recreate the same thing with two and three that we recreated with one and two. Yeah.
well, okay, so here's the thing with three. Three anciently matriarchal cultures began the count with three. It was very complex. And the reason they did that is because they were a lunar based time, right? But that gave them something. That gave them the understanding of luminosity and reflection, right? And it also gave them humility. This is very indigenous as well. The humility of understanding that they weren't the only consciousness. Humans were not the only consciousness on the planet. In fact, they just weren't. Right now, what we've done with the control factor is quite different. Plato gave us the monad, and then Aristotle gave us the dyad, and now we're stuck in that, let's just have two sides of things, both sidesisms. There is a thirding that we need to understand, because if we don't, we can't really reflect. We don't understand luminosity. We don't understand multiple times. We don't understand that everything is multiple, and, we reduce it. We're a reductionist, separatist sort of situation.
Yeah, I'll be
Well,
right back. Thank you.
I don't, okay. God, Grace Ann, come back.
Grace Ann has many responsibilities here to animals, among others. So Sabine, go ahead, please.
I would like to make a point here. Everything is multiples. I agree with that point. But by using the word thirding, you're already limiting that as well. Why
No,
not
that's a
leave it open? Why do we have to use that term then? Why can't we just say, I agree with Grace Ann here, totally. Why do we need to have such a term? We could just leave it open. It can be as many as it wants to be, right? I mean, I think thirding is, I agree with Grace Ann here. This is a similar approach, duality, thirding, quadruples, why limit it at all?
Well, and that's where there is actually a mathematical system Thirding is important because of where it comes from and the time accounting and the space accounting, right? That is done, right? In matriarchal cultures. Now, that begins a system of sevens, which winds up with this spiral, non-repeatable spiral, right? Which is kairos and kairotic symbiogenesis, if you add in Myra J. Hurd. So that if we get stuck in a dyad, right, of it's either this or that, first of all, we have to acknowledge that there is no such thing as pan-indigenous. There's a multiplicity there, right? So we're already putting this dyad together, and that's where we've been in Western culture forever, and I'd like to get out of it.
If I may, if I may, I'd like to push back on the reduction of what thirding is to just either two dyads or
That's right.
fewer than multiple. Charles Sanders Peirce is not in the same line of thinking as thirding, but he does offer an answer to Sabine. He doesn't know you, Sabine, but he has an answer for you. The idea is that all of existence is the creating of a third off of the first third, and then another third off of the second third. And I think Hegel gave him this idea in the beginning, because Hegel is the third creator with someone else. And then Christians, of course, love the triangle of God, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, or Mary, something. The Christians did it too. But if you read Charles Sanders Peirce, when you have the first, the second, and third, and the secondness, for example, is when it has no agency, it's being acted upon. But anyway, to go back to the third that yields another third, it never stops. And even the making of a tree, for example, starts out with three little entities. They're extended to the new third, and all this. And that is why we're so dynamic, because we have never stopped creating a new third.
And that's the dunamis that's been hidden
Nice.
by the language of Western culture, and even in now the broken Native American indigenous cultures. I mean, I think Vine Deloria was very, very clear on that. These are broken cultures. They have their sacred hoops are broken. There is a memory, right? And that the traditional Native Americans are getting back to, but indigeneity is not simply Native Americans, right? We're all indigenous to somewhere, and we can all access this thirding. And the complications there are tremendous, right? But it does become a recognition of the multiple. And that also means multiple truths. And I just think it's really an important thing to start to bring out, because it does critique the Western notion of the first and second, the dyad, right?
I have a problem with Western, because having lived a huge chunk of my life over here in France, I see what's going on in the States as a foreign country that I would have never expected to consider it to be. But there's just when we talk about nature and we talk about getting back to things, I feel like the trip is going to have to be longer for a lot of Americans, because money has become so overwhelmingly intertwined into the existence of Americans that at least we don't have the possibilities over here. We don't let one person accumulate everything. Two or three people are accumulating an awful lot, but the screaming about it is going on. So what's interesting is Western ways of thinking or knowing are, for me, it's too encompassing. What's going on over here, this debate that's going to happen tonight, the fact that people are not sending, what's his name, Vance to the funny farm. Over here, you can't find one person who can say that guy makes sense. Or you got to understand, middle middle finger politics have their place. No, no, no. And so you see, Western ways of thinking for me are no longer something I can adhere to if the American way of thinking is part of it. But we're on, who said multiple truths? I think Sabine did, but we're really on a slippery slope trying to pin down what is knowable.
Yes, I mean, so epistemology itself, right?
Yeah.
And wherever you're at is part of a waveform, right?
Mhm.
And so understanding the basis of that wave, that discursive wave, right? I think to take it back into vital materialism, feminist materialism, and I'm not speaking of materialism in the way of gaining, money or all of that. I'm talking about it in a quantum parlance sort of way, and also Myra J. Hurd with everything is alive, like alive, right? I mean, we can start to get there, and the problems that I see are with language and how we language things and how language does us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot here. I mean, David, I love that slide and I love what you're doing, but my urge is to say, let's do something thirding with that. And I would bet if you talk to Eduardo Barrera, if you talk to Don Pepion, if you talk to Gregory Quejete, that they would also say, this is helpful, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
Grace Ann, okay, go ahead.
I wanted to say that in Leroy Little Bear, who teaches quantum
Right.
physics,
And I was there, yeah. So
decades, and he's saying that the difference between indigenous metaphysics and quantum physics for him is that the wave is spirit, So I think he would. I'll ask him. He's in his late 90s now, so we have but yeah, I wanted to send him my presentation I did on his work because I actually went through tons of stuff of his and put it into slides and narrative anyway, my storytelling. And I want to make sure I got it the way that he would say that, yeah, I understand what you're doing. The notion that he sees as different is mainly around spirit. I don't see Karen Barad or Donna Haraway or Myra J. Hurd saying that these vibrant materialisms are spirit.
right, right.
There's a huge difference. And I hear you saying that vital materialism is over and above looking down upon indigenous ways of knowing
No,
as somehow off the mark because they're not buying into.
no, I don't. Not at all. That's not at all the way that I meant that,
Okay.
because so much of what I have done is with indigenous ways of knowing, right? But I do think that when we mix, when we take just quantum physics, we are back into like sort of a Western science, ideology. But when we mix that with Myra J. Hurd, and Donna Haraway is really nice because, and the other thing about Barat and what she's doing is nice, is that it's contingent and temporary, right? What we know is contingent and temporary and always changing, right? Which is also part of indigenous ways of knowing in terms of place, right? And language reflects that. So I think that I think there needs to be a thirding. you know, and it doesn't have to be at cross purposes with Western ways of knowing or indigenous ways of knowing. But there is no, I want to say that there is no single indigenous ways of knowing. There is no single.
Leroy Little Bear is very clear that he's doing Blackfeet ways of,
Exactly. Exactly.
and as well as now Vine Deloria has traveled around to quite a few different tribes and things. So
Right. Including South America.
his tribe. I want to show you now Leroy Little Bear's chart. And all I've done is dressed it up a little bit and graphically, and here you can see it. So consciousness, quantum physics affects reality. So they agree there. Matter, objects, space, curvature. He's talking about a new development past Einstein, but anyway, and staying more descriptive in native science. He's talking about Kahadi's book where he wrote the introduction, and then in time, space-time continuum, and time just is. And here's matter, particle wave duality, just wave, reality, no deep reality, subjective all the way, cause and effect, paradox, cause and effects. You see that reductionist, holistic, experiment, proof, observation, knowledge, cumulative versus renewal. Renewal is a big thing. And then say language and languaging. He talks about the binary and the math of the English language. And that's where the colonization has happened here in America with the English language and then the process orientation. So those are his, 10 categories of comparison of quantum physics and Blackfeet.
Right.
So, and he's pretty.
What would really help me is a side-by-side screen down the thing. But it was one of your slides where you saw the IWOC with its same sort of subdivision that we just saw as a table. But yours was a polygon of some kind where there was IWOC and WWOC. And the contrast between the two, the difference and similarity between the two was more. I love visuals that make clear what's what and what's where. Can you bring back that one slide where you had both of the
Waywalk and let me look for it and I'll get back to you.
It was like the 5th, 6th, 7th slide. I'm not sure.
Oh, I love that too.
When they presented that, it was in the context of we started at different places and that's how we've ended up at different places.
Yes.
So, starting with trying to break things apart to identify static reality versus trying to put things together to identify dynamics that occur led to these divergent paths. And so it doesn't mean either one is wrong. It means, can we encompass a broader view? I wanted to ask Cristiano, does any of this relate to your research? Is any of it helpful?
Yes, Grace. It's all about my research, and I think that our discussion, we are able to see. It's not a spectrum, but a continuum about these two sides of thought. In our responsibility, it's not to trace what is correctly to research, the correct way of research, but to trace and describe any aspects or characteristics that may contribute to the research as a whole. And some questionings about life will surface, surpasses or walks by I walk aspect of research, and others questionings and askings about life will pass by waywalk researching. So I think we can propose the two aspects and bring together as a postmodernism says that I don't know. I don't know. In other side, we can decide, but making some determinism here to 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 put what is the correct principles of say that this is a reality, this is true. I don't know. I think that because seeing the pool of January 6th, we see that in the Jerry this discussion, what I think is that we have some Republicans way of thinking and a multiplicity of Republicans way of thinking, and in the other side the Democrats, and we have many plurality of democratic thinking. I don't know. I think that is it. Because patriotism for Democrats, it carries definition and a concept, and for Republicans another. So I think that we have a multiplicity of realities too. I think this is the whole reality.
You're on mute, David.
Unmute, and then I think I found some slides too that I think Paul was looking for. So, and I think I need to wrap up. So
Yeah.
I'll have a wrap.
Real quick, David, I paid very careful attention to your presentations and sought to look up as much literature around everything I could, and then reframe it in terms of something a management journal might listen to.
Oh,
And
good.
so I have written approximately 3,000 words on that. It's nothing as deep. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that management people aren't ready for anything close to what we're doing here. But in an attempt to get a foothold of any kind in, I've done that. And so I'd like to send that out to everybody and request changes, updates, or anything else. And I will fully integrate people's ideas and then try and get it out there next week.
That is amazing, Ronnie.
I'd feel really
Whoa.
good. I'd feel really good if we could try and like produce our ideas out there, get the conversation going. So I'm going to send that. Yes.
Oh, wow. Amazing, Ronnie. Thank you.
Email.
Yep.
Email.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
gonna.
Oh,
sense.
fantastic.
Cool.
Thank you, Ronnie. I get all your emails.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. This is a lovely discussion. I have to go. It's Bobby's birthday.
Oh, nice.
It's Bobby's.
Happy birthday to
It's
Bobby.
Bobby's birthday.
I'll let him know.
Oh, congratulations.
It's
Oh,
my wife's birthday.
Oh,
A dear friend's birthday. The mother of a dear
Oh.
friend's birthday.
Yeah.
ta-da.
happy October, everybody.
Oh, well, happy
Good
celebrating.
to see you, Ronnie. I want to talk to you personally
Absolutely.
at some point. So
I
call
will-
me, please.
Oh, sounds great. I will make
Okay.
sure that we make some time. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So, first, I'm just going to wrap it up here because it's about that time. All right, so Microsoft. All right, so here you can see Waywalk, two different, and there's many differences. It's not the only ones. There's many, and there's many within each. So I think I'll make that point clear in the future. But there's more than one. And Waywalk, I've already gone through my simulations, and I've been asked to push on the thirding more in this and vital material. look at carefully. I walk. I'll rethink the pantheism, but its idea is to get beneath all of those.
Well, one thing, can I comment real quick? In the iWalk version of that, I notice if you go around and see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. Okay, it's 1, 2, 3 are the same. You use the same code words. I'm calling them code words: beneath, before, and bets. And when you get to number 4 on the iWalk, it's
I didn't use being. I used place.
you use place, and it's something that I noticed. That's all. And then becoming, between, and beyond. I think all of the other, in other words, of the 7 elements, the one that's different that I noticed in the purple iWalk one is item 4, which is place, and that's where my head is at, and is at a lot of the time. And I think otherwise you're coding for those different things. In other words, the box, the card catalog drawer into which you are putting stuff is the same. Beneath, before, bets, and then 4 in iWalk is place, and in WWalk it's time. That tells the story that you've been trying to say, and I can maybe remember that. That's vital.
I did it both. I took out being. I'm still responding to Jerry's critique last week. I took out.
I understand. Be that as it may, the difference is clearly shown to me by the difference in headings between the two. It said, "Oh, ways of knowing." There's a million ways of knowing. The critical distinction between the two, somebody just verbalized and said, "Well, it's about place as opposed to time."
I got you. I think we have to recognize the genocide that occurred in the United States and in other places in the world where indigenous people were exterminated and bounties, and they were scalped, and there all kinds of bloody massacres. So, and it had to do with taking away their schools, taking kids out of their family, et cetera, et cetera. And there was some of this, or a lot of this, in New Zealand. So this slide is about New Zealand's braided river. And I just want to say that every tribe is different, and I made that exceedingly clear, every tribe. But there's still an indigenous way of knowing, but it had differences across New Zealand, across the islands. And that was the key. Now, Waywalk, there were people that were quite sympathetic with Maori, and there were people who were unsympathetic. There were people who got along and people who didn't get along. But the whole society made a conscious effort to introduce the Maori language. This was a problem, however, because there isn't one Maori language. There were Maori differences in language across the islands. But nevertheless, there was an attempt. Every building now, every public building, every university building, college, whatever, dorm, has both the Maori word and the English word on it. TV has instructions on how to learn the Maori language, and anybody can tune into that. They haven't. So there's a conscious attempt, but are they succeeding? I think they are not succeeding. The fact that the person we were hosting us was the only faculty in the business that was Maori, and he ultimately left, and now there are none, just as a kind of an example. But this is the formulation of Maori solution, and it's not, again, it's very partial solution. Even the word solution overstates it, but the kaupapa is the term for non-Maori. So they actually have a word for it. I think in the United States, we have words for it too, but kaupapa isn't derogatory, although it is settler colonialists, and people who came to move into New Zealand and had a very different value system. So, and this is about how to do co-design streams of research and knowledge, and to do something bicultural. So I will just leave it at that and say that this is uh, from Tells It True has the slides that I've shown you, and you can find them there. So, Tells
I
It
can't
True.
read what Cristiano just wrote.
I'll try to read it to you. Let's see. Cristiano, what is a worry to me? Kamala Harris's Democrat team are taking in consideration the contributions of Beyonce, but in the same time, that friend and family in Beyonce are revealing some radical, clumsy republicanism in their professional and beyond professional life. Yeah, there's a uh, so I am not happy with either party, okay?
Right.
Unless I'm really concerned about fascism taking over, but I'm also concerned that, and I'm going to get a lot of hate mail, but that the Democratic Party isn't all that democratic and
Hmm.
hasn't gone beyond its material empire and its corporate donor system. However, I do see an effort by Kamala Harris. I don't think she's going to create a matriarchal society,
No,
Jerry.
no, no. It really, matriarchy has very little to do. There is matristic and matrilineal, right? But it has very little to do with an individual woman, okay? Because most individual women in the United States, at least, and Betty, if she's still here, will understand this, right? They have the point of view of patriarchy. They have incorporated it so much into their ways of going,
Yes,
right?
yes.
That we're living in a patriarchy, and this is where Julia Kristeva really critiques that, because she says there's not even a syllable available for those of us who want to speak to this. I disagree with her somewhat. I think Karen Barat, if I can read something just real quickly here, because
Isn't that
do you mind? I know you need to wrap up. Importantly, language context is interpreted through organizing principles that are either based in intra-action, inseparability, right, or interaction, separateness. These are very different perspectives on what constitutes ontology, which is separatism. Interaction amplifies a flow of entangled relations that disrupts ideals of metaphysical individualism or fixed ontologies. The inseparability perspective understands every aspect of matter and language as relational and contingent in becoming, while the perspective of separatism understands ontology as a state of being with fixed characteristics.
Okay.
Inseparability calls for linear configurations and reconfigurations with multiple truths continually in transition within and across relations. It is a contingent, temporary performance of matter.
Okay. Send it that.
Prof. David, we have a author in philosophy, American philosophy, named by Richard Rorty. I don't know if you know about him, but it's an important American philosopher that they speak a lot about contingency and irony when we are talking about narratives and so on.
If you send me that name or put it in the chat, appreciate it. And yeah, I'll check it out. I need to wrap up because I have to go get my blood work done again because my blood is too old.
Is David, can you and Grace Ann maybe call me later? Well, I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about coming down to the conference and like some of the logistics there.
Okay. Let me wrap up and say thank you and thank Moon Circle for a fine and wonderful discussion and lots of things, lots of unsettled questions. We're going to continue next week with anti-narrative, anti-narrative, I walk, way walk, thirding, other things, vital materialism, etc. So thank you all and goodbye. Have a wonderful week And I hope you all vote for Kamala Harris. So thank you.
And,
Have a
and
great
good night.
too. Bye.
Bye.
I didn't even know if I'm, oh yeah, here's live stream. Goodbye, live stream people.